Hello, everyone. We are here with Stephanie Koff, a.k.a. LB, who you might recognize as my co-host on the 5-8 and longtime friend. But we wanted to do a slightly different format today to talk about this Epstein business and kind of lay out everything that we know about it. And by we, I mean you, Stephanie. So that's the purpose here. Now, for people who don't know and might not be aware, you have a terrific podcast out called The World Beneath, which you put out, I've lost all track of time, years ago now at this point, in which you did a lot of research. Was it 4 years? Oh, my God. You did a lot of research on both organized crime and the intelligence community, and specifically people within that. Everybody should go listen to that podcast if they haven't done so. But you've done a lot of research in both of these things. It's sort of your beat, if you will, while covering all this stuff, and how we met, really, when we met back on Twitter, when it was still Twitter, and we were all much more naive about things, or I was. So
10 years. 10
right.
years ago.
Yeah, 10 years ago. Okay, now you started looking into Trump's history of money laundering back then. It was like before the 2016 election. It was 10 years ago, okay?
Yes.
Okay, and that is how you found Jeffrey Epstein. You came across Jeffrey Epstein that way, okay, which is a very different way than most people come across Jeffrey Epstein, sex trafficker. So we're going to talk not about that. We're going to talk about how you found him, which was you followed the money.
I was following the money.
What did you discover?
Well, I was looking at all of the criminals around Donald. And I had a head start with a piece of information that I had gotten in 2005, like before there was even an imagination that this man would run for president, or even had any, I think, to sort of the layman's understanding, if you knew who he was, which people did, that he was political in any way. Just maybe he had been, and we learned that he had been. But 2005, I mean, he had this new reality show with Mark Burnett. And so I had a circle of people that I knew. I'm a writer, a screenwriter, so I knew folks in that circle with that man.
Okay.
And
meaning Burnett.
Yes.
Yes.
And had learned that Donald was in a tremendous amount of debt to some Russians. And it was kind of threatening this new thing of the this idea of him as this self-made, billionaire, whatever the thing was, a successful businessman, because it was all about to crumble. And there's been a tremendous amount of reporting since I learned that, verifying all of that. So I had that information at the time, back in the day. And so when he came down that escalator, I was like, oh no, That's the guy that's in debt to a bunch of Russian gangsters. Wait a minute. And so I started trying to figure out who those Russians may be. And then in doing that, came across Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay. Interesting. So Trump to the Russians to Epstein. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, organized crime.
Specifically
Russian organized crime. And then trying to understand how Donald and Fred's empire, his father's empire, which was built with the Genovese crime family, and then the building of Trump Tower in Manhattan, that move, they had different territory, as Fred would call it, as Donald has said on the record, that Manhattan wasn't, according to his father, that's not our territory.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't. It was Gambino territory. So for Donald Trump specifically to be able to develop in Manhattan, Fred arranged for, and Roy Cohn arranged for the two crime families, the Gambinos and the Genovese, to form what actually kind of became known as the concrete cartel, that where all the five families were in there. And this was the bid rigging over concrete contracts to develop in Manhattan. And Donald Trump was sort of it was called the Donald Trump deal. And so that was in the middle of it for those U.S. crime families and the racket they were running, which is this very racket that Giuliani used to prosecute the five families.
Four of the five families.
Four of the five families. Castellano was a holdout, and then he was killed, shot dead in the street. So that's the history. There's way more than that. During that time, before the Russian mafia had really taken over New York, which it did, it rolled in the late 80s. Some of it even back to the 70s, but very specifically in the 80s and the 90s, and just sort of rolled up a lot of the territories as their own. And they did it by laundering money through Donald's casinos. There was a lot of ways that they did all of that. There was a very prominent Russian gangster named Ivankov, who had actually an office in Trump Tower in Manhattan, but he was ultimately tipped off and caught by Andy McCabe's team. Like when you start learning about these characters back in the day of what they were doing, both in the law enforcement side, pursuing Russian organized crime, and from the Russian organized crime side, the bosses and the key figures there that were all in business in some way, fashion with Donald Trump. So that all sort of coincided. The Russian gangsters were rolling up the U.S. crime families, and then in the early 2000s, to like 2005, 2006, right around when I was hearing this stuff about him, what was happening was the Russians wanted to, keep using Trump to go internationally. So properties, we had Trump Panama developing, and Trump Toronto developing, and Trump Georgia developing, and all of these foreign developments, which we were watching. If you watch The Apprentice, it unfolds on The Apprentice as well. This sort of expansion of the Trump thing, where he was just licensing his name to be put on these things because he was really over leveraged. And they were like the one in Georgia, the Trump Tower there, all they did was just stick a shovel in the ground and a whole bunch of money was laundered. There's Trump Baku, which, was quite a bit of reporting how that was a front for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Again, Iran and their corruption very closely tied in with Russian organized crime as well. So that's the background. That's why the Trump-Russia thing is not a hoax. Donald is the hoax. He did. And there's so much reporting. And Trump, the company, Alan Weingart, all those people, they affirmed this. They said, yeah, we took that money, and we, the problem with it is some of it was illegal, but a lot of it's not illegal, right? He couldn't get a casino license in Australia, infamously. They would not give him a casino license because of his ties to organized crime, both U.S. organized crime and Russian organized crime.
Oh, so a major Five Eyes power decided that he couldn't have a casino license because of his ties to organized crime, and specifically Russian organized crime. Let's just underline that, because it seems important. Australia is, as they say, a real country, that is one of our allies, and, strong allies. So, okay.
So to get to Jeffrey, how you get to Jeffrey is, there was a time in the 80s where Donald was really having issues. And he was sort of over leveraging himself. He was building in Atlantic City. He was doing these things. He couldn't get them. He always had a problem getting the money because legitimate banks would stop lending to him, which was the crisis he was facing in the early 2000s, early aughts, mid aughts. Is that there was Deutsche Bank, but even Deutsche Bank was turning its, so he had to go for this Russian money. You could get Russian money, you could get Chinese money, and the Chinese money hadn't quite showed up yet. So he took the gangsters will invest in you. So the banks were difficult. Now, part of the stuff that made it hard to get U.S. banking is because of what happened with him in the 80s with Bear Stearns. So there's a guy that ran Bear Stearns. This is all the reporting done by Wayne Barrett, and I recommend everybody go read Wayne Barrett's work on Donald and Fred Trump and the sort of Trump Inc. He did extraordinary work on that. He also did great work on Giuliani and showing what sort of a criminal and a fraud Giuliani was, and it still is, I guess. Ace Greenberg ran Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns is the company that infamously went down in 2008 with all the credit default swaps, all that kind of stuff that just crashed, the Big Short type of thing. So, but before that, they were a real player, like Bear and Lehman and, these other entities and Goldman Sachs. And so Donald had a very close relationship with Ace Greenberg. Ace Greenberg is the man whose daughter was Jeffrey Epstein's student when Jeffrey Epstein was at the Dalton School. And Epstein did whatever he did at the Dalton School to leverage that, his just being a math teacher and tutor at this private school, into working directly for Ace Greenberg. So he went into the financial industry at Bear Stearns, and he didn't come in as a low-level person and work his way up. He came in at a very senior level, and it caused a great sort of upset at Bear Stearns and stuff. Who is this guy? Where is he coming from? And why is Ace giving him this plum spot? And he was in sort of handling private wealth management. And his big client that he had, that Ace gave him, was Edgar Bronfman, who's Sam Bronfman's son. Sam Bronfman established Seagram's and was Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano's business partner. So during the bootlegging days. And Edgar Bronfman has a lot of ties to Russia as well, quite frankly. And it's his daughters that were part of that NXIVM thing. So that's people recognize the word Bronfman. That's the name.
He's Canadian, though, right? Seagram's was Canadian, so that was part of the bootlegging thing. Yeah, okay.
But that was Jeffrey's client, and he got into difficulties and troubles there at Bear Stearns with that particular client, managing, and was basically had to be fired. And Ace really resisted firing Jeffrey. And what I uncovered and discovered was he didn't fire him. He just moved him into offshores. And Jeffrey went into establishing offshore accounts and offshore money, sort of tax havens for Bear Stearns clients. If you go into the Offshore Leaks database, which is where I found Jeffrey's offshore accounts, some of them, you can see there are old Bear Stearns officers. In fact, Ace Greenberg's partner at Bear Stearns still connected and linked into those offshore accounts. So he was very much doing that business, and he was doing that business for Bear Stearns right at the time that Bear Stearns was doing these wild risk money backing things for Donald developing his casino. So that is where I'm like, who's this Jeffrey Epstein and what is this? And then I started looking into Jeffrey Epstein. I'm like, oh my God, everybody's some kind of sex trafficking criminal. He's not the only one that was tied in with Donald's business or his financial backing in some way, that also was convicted for sex trafficking. There's another guy named Tawfiq Arif, who was a big partner with Donald, who had that yacht with all the underage prostitutes and the trafficking that went on there. There's a lot of, I think, off of Turkey they were finally caught. He was finally caught. So there's the folks in Panama, his business partners in Panama were nailed for sex trafficking, international sex trafficking. And the people in Canada, there's ties in there for his business partners in Trump Toronto in Canada, who were also Russian. In terms of, one was the main partner there was the son-in-law of Semyon Mogilevic's business partner, and consigliere. So Semyon Mogilevich being a great big Russian gangster. Yep. And then there's all the Craig Unger reporting on Mogilevich that Donald was in fact laundering Mogilevich's money himself. And that's the man who originally compromised him. So that's the money. It's full of sex traffickers and it's full of Russian gangsters.
So let's underline again Semyon Mogilevich, because that's an important connection, because Semyon Mogilevich, if I remember correctly, there's a lot of names in these criminal things, was at one point directly working with Robert Maxwell. That was in one of those books, right?
Correct. In Maxwell's biography, Mogilevich is named several times. I believe the source for that was Ari Ben Menashe, who was a former Israeli intelligence officer who also looked like for the Kremlin. But that Robert Maxwell biography, this is Ghislaine Maxwell's father,
Right.
Outlines Robert Maxwell as a Mossad and a KGB spy. I mean, it's what he was, intelligence officer. It looks like he also did, there's quite an FBI file on him. He probably worked with U.S. intelligence at times, and it looks like he definitely worked for the Queen. He was very close.
He was friends with the Queen.
Very close with the Queen. He touches the Queen. There's video of him, footage of him touching her, like walking alongside her and touching her. Like, that's very rare.
It's very strange.
Very strange.
He also, when he died in 1991, in November of 1991, by falling off a yacht off the coast of the Canary Islands, as happens, I guess, all the time. No foul play at all suspected. It's weird how that thread keeps going up. But remember, he had defrauded the pensions of the company, the publishing company that he bought.
That's
so
right.
he was about to collapse before he died. Like, his entire financial empire was a house of cards, and it was all bullshit. So
that's right.
Important thing to keep in mind, I think.
And he knew Donald. Donald knew him directly. There's a lot of
they were on the yacht in page 6.
They were on the lot. Lady Ghislaine, named it after his daughter. So,
with Ivana, which is interesting because Robert Maxwell is born Jan Hoek and is Czech, and Ivana Trump also Czech. So I envision a scenario where the two of them are talking in Czech and Trump is just standing there like an idiot. Yeah.
Junior, I believe, is fluent in Czech. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
People they underestimate Don Jr.
Yeah. And Baron is fluent in Slovenian. Yes.
Another character that was in that world with them, with Robert Maxwell, and it's important because his money shows up in Jeffrey Epstein's next big financial scam after the Bear Stearns sort of moving him, is a man named Adnan Khashoggi, who is Jamal Khashoggi's uncle.
Right.
And there's not a lot of Khashoggis, actually, by the way. So Donald knew the Khashoggis very, very, very well. Ivana was called Adnan her best friend quite often. And they when Donald bought the one and only yacht he's ever bought, he bought Khashoggi's yacht. So he bought Khashoggi's yacht. And Khashoggi was a known intelligence officer for Saudi Arabia, but it was at one point the wealthiest man in the world.
He was an arms dealer, right? Wasn't he an arms dealer?
Yeah. He was a big
I remember that dealer. Even in the moment, people knew who he was. Like, he wasn't some hidden figure. Like, and I remember reading about it in the I didn't know who these people were at the time. Yeah.
And so he knew Paul Manafort was also in this mix, Tom Barrack in this mix. There were a lot of folks that we saw show up in Trump 1.0 as president and helping with his campaign that were swirling around in this sort of what I call, the underworld. But it's where sort of crime syndicates and intelligence services are just, intertwined.
Right.
And that's what MAGA is aware of when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. They can kind of feel that there's something odd there. There's a pull there. There are intelligence services there. Now, it's important to sort of point out that before Robert Maxwell died, there are several people who are credible witnesses and know what they're talking about that have identified that Robert Maxwell was taking Jeffrey Epstein around and sort of introducing him as his protege. So this myth and this lie that Ghislaine and Jeffrey told, that he kind of came after Ghislaine's dad died, she moved to New York, and that's where she met Jeffrey. No. They knew each other before her father died or was killed or whatever happened off the side of that yacht. So that's kind of key. And then Jeffrey went from there to creating one of the biggest Ponzi schemes, the biggest Ponzi scheme ever before Bernie Madoff. He almost kind of invented it. That was called Tower Financial. And it looks like, and I talked a lot with Steve Hoffenberg, you talked with him as well, like He was a tricky character. He's passed away now, but uh, he went to prison for quite a long time.
Right.
And he got out of prison right at the beginning of Trump's first term. The first person to call him when he was out of prison actually was Roger Stone. He told me. But Hoffenberg was kind of mortified with what Jeffrey had done with the victims. That reporting had kind of just come out when he was just out of prison, and he did contact the victims, and he did want to kind of like, he just was like, oh my God, because the money from Tower Financial was never fully recovered. Hoffenberg didn't understand why he went to prison and Jeffrey got off. I, talked to him a bit. I'm like, well, what are some of the ways that someone gets out of being prosecuted for a big crime, financial crime like this? And so it looks like Jeffrey very much cooperated with prosecutors. Now, there were a lot of criminals that were part of Tower in terms of, that was a big money laundering vehicle. And quite a lot of the money from Iran-Contra, Steve Hoffenberg suspected was pushed, that Jeffrey got his hands on, it was pushed through Tower. That is money that Robert Maxwell was in charge of that also disappeared around the time of his pension scandal. And so there was a lot of pressure on Robert Maxwell right before his death. Like, it wasn't just his empire was crumbling. There was a lot about to be exposed of the kind of places he'd had his hands in, that and money that disappeared that it should never have, and he should never have been anywhere near it. And it exposed nation state intelligence services and stuff that maybe they shouldn't have been doing. So that's the world. It's like a private intelligence rogue operatives, like private arms dealers, like Adnan Khashoggi, or the guy that Nicolas Cage played in that movie, Lord of War, like those guys. That world, there's also, don't have to just deal in arms or traffic in arms. You can traffic in Kompromat, right? You can traffic in other things that would have value to intelligence services of both our nation and other nations. And it does very much look like that Robert Maxwell was in that business. It looks like Ghislaine took the mantle and Jeffrey took the mantle from him and developed their own little operation. So all of the pieces are there for Epstein to have that connection. And Tower Financial, I think, is also a great big piece that doesn't get talked about enough in terms of what kind of deal did this guy cut with those prosecutors that he got out of facing prison, and his business partner went in for 20 years, 18 years or whatever. And knowing the kind of money, the kind of players that Epstein, just with that one fraud and scheme alone, those are very valuable names and a lot of money that he could have turned over to prosecutors to cut himself a deal. That could very well be the key to Alex Acosta's phrase about Jeffrey when he says, I was told he belonged to intelligence. Because he would have some really big names in Tower and really powerful players that maybe were on a sanction list, quite frankly.
So just to review quickly, this is still, is Tower even in the early 90s yet? Or is
I think
it
it
still
was the early 90s, yeah.
Okay. So we're through the 90s. He's now worked, Jeffrey has, as a math teacher at Dalton, where he got fired.
Correct.
At Bear Stearns in some weird capacity, where he got sort of fired. And then he went to work, if I remember correctly, Hoffenberg said he went to work for Douglas Leese, who was another person in that world. And
who was an arms dealer. Who was an arms dealer for the Queen. Right.
And Leese, according to Hoffenberg, recommended Epstein to Hoffenberg by saying he's smart and he has no moral compass. So Hoffenberg knew he was going to do this Ponzi scheme and he needed like a guy to help him with it. And that's why he hired him. Like specifically.
And that would have been while Robert Maxwell was still alive or just sort of on his way out to the next world. Yeah.
Right. So
right around that time.
Now, but we're all the way into the early 90s, and it's so far it's money and offshores and arms deals and Russian mobsters and shady characters, but we haven't gotten to the sex trafficking part yet, right?
Yeah, as far as we know, it wasn't happening then. And that's just, we only know what, are in those court,
Right.
what the prosecutors brought to light. And a lot of it's still redacted. But yeah, then he's setting up and he's got Les Wexner, somehow folding him in.
Les Wexner being the guy that owned or owns Victoria's Secret and these other big retail chains. And that was the time when Jeffrey was walking around saying he was like a spotter for Victoria's Secret,
That's correct.
As a pickup line that he was using.
I can't remember the name of the journalist now, but there is a journalist in the Ohio area, really good, a great.
Oh yeah, I remember him.
Great.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of work on Wexner and Wexner's ties to organized crime. And Wexner as a potential, what's called a non-official cover, a knock for our own intelligence services. He has an airfield there in Ohio, private airstrip, and there were planes coming in and out of there that this journalist believed and tracked to our own intelligence services. So there's another kind of...
Right. And Wexner's the guy that owns the lovely, huge mansion on the Upper East Side of New York on East 73rd, where he's like, why don't you just live in my mansion? Yeah. Why don't you Cato Caitlin this and you just go? I don't need it. It's fine. It's good.
To Epstein, yeah. Wexner handed over the most valuable piece of property, private residence in Manhattan, to Jeffrey. Just gave it to him.
Which is, I think, I would say odd, unusual, strange, whatever word you want to use. It's weird.
It's odd. I mean, the other odd thing, and we talked about this this past week a lot, but we kept talking about it at the time too. We do know that all of these homes, New York, down in Palm Beach?
Palm Beach,
Palm Beach, out in New Mexico, the island and the plain, that these properties that either Jeffrey owned or had access to or were his, right, in some way, shape, or form, all had surveillance technology wired throughout them. That's in the underlying evidence in the court cases against him. So we're not just speculating about this. It's in the evidence. And you have to understand then we're talking about properties that he was using for the abuse while he abusing these minors and raping the minors at a time where it was kind of we call it Radio Shack, but that's really all there was. Like, how does this guy, it was almost pre-internet even. Certainly back when the internet was, we're talking about early 90s, right? So he would have had to have a closed network, somehow some way of recording and storing and wiring up in the walls. It's not what it is today. And I just don't see Jeffrey Epstein being the Radio Shack guy who's doing all this on his own for his own perversion. So somebody wired up his shit for him. Now, he could have paid somebody privately to do that, certainly, but considering we're watching people like Ehud Barak wander in and out of the, these properties, I would put money down on, had a little help from some very sophisticated signal intelligence groups. Yeah.
Sure. I referenced it on the show, but there was that movie Sliver with Billy Baldwin where he has the whole building wired up and they show him in this little room with all the screens and Sharon Stone is on the screens. But it's that sort of setup is what he had effectively. It was where he had all these cameras and there was a master control room, presumably, where you could look at everything and record it and all that kind of stuff. And presumably the people that were staying there had no idea that this was a thing.
And we know it was recorded because the recordings made their way into evidence.
Right.
And Pam Bondi just recently said that this is child porn and that's why she can't show anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, well, are the girls alone? Or,
Right.
I mean, so let's have, who's in there? Who's in there with them?
Yeah. We just need to know who. We don't need to see it. We actually don't want to.
No.
So now there's a lot of myths about this guy, Epstein. Yeah. He's almost like this mythical figure now. And I think that adds to the mystique and the kind of misinformation and disinformation that's out there around him. So What are some myths that are not true? Because I think that we've helped so far in explaining all the financial stuff. I think that's an important piece that nobody really talks about that much. But is there anything else myth-wise that people should know?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the myth of his intelligence, that he was some kind of wizard, some financial genius of like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And there were people, I can't remember the man's name, but there was a man who was like, actually was a financial wizard who was like, yeah, he was, he was kind of a street guy. He wasn't this sort of magical, sophisticate, and he didn't seem like he just wanted to party. He just partied all the time. So I don't know how much money managing he was doing. So I think that's sort of a big myth around him. It's to cast him as some kind of genius is probably what he wanted. He wore that Harvard sweatshirt around Alan Dershowitz and all those, right? He's always wearing he didn't go to Harvard.
No.
I think there is discrepancy of whether Bill Barr's dad actually hired him.
I think his dad left the semester before Jeffrey arrived, so he could have, but the person who took over wasn't sure, apparently,
right,
or wouldn't say.
That's why I kind of just stay away from all of that. Now, Bill Barr's law firm did represent, the law firm that Bill Barr worked at did represent Jeffrey Epstein in his criminal cases. I believe that's true. But that's a great big law firm.
Yeah,
so,
I was going to say, that's like a picture.
Some of these things, if you just kind of understand the way the world works a little bit, they peel off as just, myth or conspiracy.
I feel that way about photos. Like, I feel like Ghislaine Maxwell tried to have her picture taken with every single human on Earth that would ever be. So just because somebody has their picture taken with Ghislaine doesn't really mean anything. Like, as much as I love the picture of her with Elon Musk, it's just who knows what that is. It might be.
Who knows? I mean, she was a proper British socialite, right? So she wanted to be at every party, and
she was good at her job. That was her job, and she's really good at her job. She's really good at her job.
I think, that being picked specifically by Ace Greenberg and being given that hand, you're gonna. It's like, God, I'm a screenwriter, so it'd be like, I don't know. It's almost like Jeff Bezos saying, here's a great big thing. Anything you want to write for Amazon, you can write for Amazon. We'll underwrite it. We'll fund it. You can do whatever you want. Here's a budget. Here's your staff. Like beyond an overall deal. That's what he got. So it's not that it's not that he was some genius. He really, I don't know, was he blackmailing Ace Greenberg? Why did Ace Greenberg go to the mattresses for this guy? I mean, he literally was risking Bear Stearns at one point with the SEC saying, this guy's running a scam. You got to fire him. And he was like, I can't fire him. Why can't you fire him? And then he just moved him offshore. So that kind of stuff is important. And the other myth, which we already talked about, the lie that he didn't know Robert Maxwell, it's just a flat out lie. Robert Maxwell shepherded this guy to Israeli intelligence officers and introduced him as high level people and introduced Jeffrey as his protege.
Yeah, seems important.
Yeah,
1991, Robert Maxwell dies. Later in 91, Ghislaine comes to New York, starts up with Epstein, and off to the races they are. So, okay, moving on. Now, you've talked about this a lot of times, too. We're MAGA and QAnon. The Epstein files and this Epstein thing, this child sex ring, is such a huge part of their, speaking of mythology. Yeah. They have this because they've been told, and it's been pounded into their heads, that there's a secret cabal of pedophiles that's secretly in league with each other and is running the country. And it involves the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton and the basement at the pizza place and all this other crazy stuff, which, like all good pieces of disinformation, parts of it are true,
Yeah.
But they're ignoring the big orange elephant in the room here. And I think that's the problem. But before we get to that, what does MAGA have right about this? Because there's stuff in their conception of things that isn't completely batshit.
Well, I think the first thing they have right, and the big thing that they have right, that is continually dismissed whenever this gets talked about in legacy media, and even now, as it's sort of crumbling, their worlds are crashing around them because Donald is so clearly compromised. It's that it is really, really, really bad if our leaders are owned by a foreign power. That's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to have somebody in a position of power, of political power, let alone the presidency or the Supreme Court
or the mayor of New York
or in Congress. It's really bad then if that individual is compromised or owned by a foreign power, but if what compromised them was that they were raping children.
Yeah.
This is unacceptable, and they are absolutely right to be outraged about it. And I am not going to put my toe in and say, because I can't wrap my own soul around the fact that MAGA is not morally outraged at all of these other things, and that Donald himself is an adjudicated rapist. The Access Hollywood tape, if it's about the sex stuff, he was in there with the Miss Teen America pageant or Universe, whatever the fuck, that teen pageant that he owned, walking in on 15-year-old girls. He's talked about his daughters, both of his daughters, sexually, one when she was a 1-year-old baby. So
he let Ivanka model while she was 15 to somebody who was a known creeper.
He handed Ivanka over to John Casablancas, who was a known rapist of 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old girls.
He was quote unquote dating Stephanie Seymour when she was 14 and he was 42.
Correct.
Which is, I'm playing dated in quotes because that ain't dating.
That predates Ivanka.
Yes.
And this is known. And Donald not only knew that, like Jeffrey, wanted to be this man's friend and was a running buddy of John Casablancas. He was much closer with Jeffrey Epstein. But it's not that he didn't see these things. These men were openly dating, statutory raping young girls, and grooming them and walking around with them in their arms, and the girls would be half dressed around other men. So yes, how could they not have, why did they not want to look at this, see this? There's a reason for some of it that we can get into, but where MAGA is right, and I just want them to know, I get it. I think you're right about this. It is absolutely unacceptable that an industrial scale child sex trafficker and rapist had Kompromat over our political and business leaders. That we need to know. The citizenry needs to know that. We can't have that. Just like you can't have somebody who's got real financial problems, like Bob Menendez, or is open to be that kind of being purchased, being bought off by a foreign government. Just like that. That we can't have those people, because then we're not, and then to have the phrase be "Make America Great Again" when everything's being owned by, a foreign intelligence, and understanding also that Jeffrey was in that world of selling, looks like selling things to foreign intelligence, but certainly connected to them. You're never going to have proof of the things that you can't have proof of, but you have to look at it and say, this man was in this sort of underworld of dealing with nation-state intelligence services at the same time that he's recording child rapes.
Yeah, and creating or cultivating the environment in which those rapes could easily take place.
Correct. And the mythology of Jeffrey was so important to him because if you have the mythology of being a financial wizard who can do more with your money than anything, oh my God, he's got planes and islands of that whole part of the gig was about being part and parcel and a critical element of the most rarefied of rarefied airs, right? Socially. So that's it. You're going to fly with Bill Clinton and go over and do something. You're going to, you've got Donald Trump as a best friend. You're in this sliver of the world that everyone aspires and can't reach, and it's mystical and magical. And how do you get up there? And anybody with even a modicum of wealth, if not, very wealthy people are like, oh my God, will he manage my money? How do I get close to Jeffrey? Because if he's magical with the money, even people who are very smart business in other ways still think that, if they're not in the realm of making money for the sake of money, right? They're not in that business of money, financial markets. It is still magic. They still want their magical person that does, manages their money and does. So that whole thing was a trust wash, right? But if you have to now go, and this is where also MAGA gets it right. You just have to put your feet in the boots of the Kremlin. Mm-hmm. You're the KGB at one point, and then FSB and SVR and all the other services now. When the Soviet Union fell and it became the Russian Federation, you are that level of human intelligence, which they were the best in the world and quite possibly still could be. I don't know. They seem to have gotten really bad. But, the skill set during Jeffrey's era, Jeffrey Epstein is person number one that you want to get to know.
Yeah.
And use in some way. And to think that foreign intelligence officers wouldn't be targeting within that room of rarefied air, a man who was walking around with 14-year-old girls, many of them, and had a best friend, Donald Trump, who was going on Howard Stearns saying he likes them young, and he's flying on planes with Bill Clinton. You better believe every foreign intelligence service agency worth its merit is trying to get in there. What an opportunity.
We're now at the 42.5-minute mark, and we haven't mentioned Prince Andrew yet, but you can add him to that list.
Add him to that list.
Yeah. You said something before about trust washing and myth creation, and it's these guys, these con men, and I'm thinking of Epstein, I'm thinking of Trump, and I'm thinking of Keith Raniere from NXIVM. One thing that they have in common is they take one little thing at the beginning that they get lucky, some favorable press coverage or something, and they use that and talk about it, talk it up, and then get more people to believe it, and they can use it as a springboard to go everywhere. With Keith Raniere, it was the one that's better than Mensa, smarter than Mensa. And somebody ran an article about it in the Albany Times or so.
The Albany Times.
It's not the Times. I forget the name of the paper. But anyway, and they ran it, and he never let that go. And then people were like, oh, he must be very smart because he's this, And Donald Trump, I forget if it was Forbes or Fortune that first added him to that list of the wealthiest people. That was bullshit. They even said later that it was. But he took that and ran with it. And he ran with it to the point where nobody thought to not believe it. And Epstein did the same thing. So after a point, if you're a normal person, let's say you're a professor at MIT, and I'm not excusing anybody for anything, but you're like, oh, there's this guy, he's inviting me to his house in Manhattan, and Bill Clinton and,
Bill Gates.
Prince Andrew and Bill Gates are going to be there.
Yeah.
You would probably think to yourself, wow, that's cool. You wouldn't think, I don't know, I better not go. Might be a sex trafficking operation. Like he presented himself by surrounding himself with these people. Anyone below that level looks at it and thinks, well, this must be great. I mean, I'm so excited to be part of this, to be involved with this. And it snowballs. And that's how these con men operate.
That's how they operate. And Jeffrey got a taste of that world, of like what that world must be like, by being a teacher of kids at the Dalton School whose parents were all part of Rarefied Air. But it's Ghislaine. It's Ghislaine who understood how to craft and create not just the myth, but the op. It was a hell of an op. That was a hell of an op.
She, from what I've heard from my own sources, what was like that too, like talking about her dad and who her dad was, and my dad, da 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 da, kind of like Meghan McCain, like the same kind of thing.
She played at Buckingham Palace on the grounds with the princes.
She also went to college with Boris Johnson. They were in, I think they were in the same. Yeah, they were in the same.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that tracks.
I don't think they hung out, but they knew each other a little bit.
Yeah,
from what I read.
It's a rarefied world.
Yeah. So
I wanted to say this. There's one other thing that there's a thing that's important to say about what MAGA gets right, but there's a word that they need to stop using.
I was going to ask that next.
Yeah. So the word blackmail. So here's what they're right about. They're right about Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is to blame.
Yes.
Pam Bondi is to blame. Not that Donald isn't, is part of this whole thing, but Pam Bondi right now is continuing the con.
Right.
And MAGA knows it, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything other than, the protection racket that Donald ensured by weaponizing the Department of Justice by putting his cronies in there. So here's why I can say this, and anybody can challenge me on this. I don't care. She is to blame. The list, right? Let's start with that word, that term. As if Jeffrey kept a list of all the men he was. Let me have my Excel spreadsheet. Since we're going to the 90s, my Excel spreadsheet of
Lotus 123.
Lotus 123 of all of the powerful men that I've compromised. I'm going to keep that in a list, as if he didn't know, as if he wasn't running around with these people, as if you don't remember that you've recorded Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever it is, the list is hers to make. It's not that there's a list that exists and we want her to pull it out of the files and show it to us. That gives her, and she knows this. That's a bullshit out of her saying, look, there's no list. Okay, I believe you. But you're the one who's supposed to make it. Pam Bondi, you have all of the underlying evidence. You have men on those tapes and I refuse to believe that the FBI did not identify them when they brought their case finally against Epstein or the Florida prosecutors.
Plus, because they're famous.
Plus, if they're famous, if you know who they are, you can write that name down and make the list. That's what MAGA's asking for. And how dare she play this word game? It reminds me of Bill Clinton going, it depends on what the meaning of the word is. It's that level of garbage. Make the list, Pam. That's what you said you were going to do. Write down the names of the men that are on those video files. Write down the names that are redacted in all of the court documents that came out of the affidavits from the victims. The victims named names. Give them to us.
Yeah. Give them to us.
And
you said,
I understand there were other people trying to call in. Oh, so and so. I understand that they got tips, and I understand that there were names, and you don't want to. And that those people were investigated and they were found not to have, maybe they were even out of the country or whatever. But there are plenty of people we know from this case. There are plenty of names, and she is the one that is supposed to compile that list of names. It doesn't exist out there that somehow magically it's either there or it disappears. And I want that confusion to stop. So Pam Bondi is, yes, hold her to the fire. The other thing that MAGA has got right, but it's the wrong way to talk about it, is using the word blackmail.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So blackmail,
and that word in the letter that they released does some heavy lifting. The whole letter hinges on the word blackmail, which is a very specific thing. Anyway, as you were saying,
yet again, Pam Bondi grabbed that word, put it to the specific definition of what that crime would be as the Department of Justice would prosecute it, and then looked at it only narrowly in the way of, do we have evidence that Jeffrey Epstein himself was blackmailing any of the men that are on a list that she can't seem to compile, that the girls were being trafficked to, and or the evidence shows a compromise. So I can believe that Jeffrey Epstein never directly blackmailed anybody.
Why?
Right?
Why would you? Like,
why would you?
If you go to Bill Clinton, or you can go to a nation state. Who has more money? Right. So
you could go to Bill Clinton, or you can go to even our allies, to their intelligence services. We know he was swimming in that world with them, and say, I got all these goods. What are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
So,
it's the word. Okay, he's not a blackmailer.
So use Kompromat. Kompromat. This is what we call Kompromat. Jeffrey ran an operation that collected Kompromat, sexual Kompromat, sex with minors, rapes, child rapes, Kompromat on powerful men in U.S., in possibly others, definitely a prince, in business, politics, finance, possibly academia,
and other things besides.
Kompromat.
Yeah. So, and now people describe themselves as content creators. Jeffrey Epstein was a Kompromat creator. That was his job. Okay. Yeah. And again, the blackmail. There's no point in blackmailing. You said something else interesting before, which is that if you own somebody with this, it's better than, like, because it can be sold, it can be transferred. That makes it even more valuable. Yeah. Right? It's not just that Jeffrey has a tape of whoever. It's that now country X has that tape, or country Y has that tape. Right. And then they're in a position to blackmail if they so choose. But he's not. Right. He's just, what am I doing? He's just the middleman. He's the ultimate middleman.
Right. And by the way, his bodyguard, I believe it was, so his houseman, ran off, I believe it wasn't it to Russia or a former Soviet Union nation, and disappeared, and he supposedly had access to all this stuff too. So it could also have been people that were working for Jeffrey Epstein that took off with this stuff and tried to secure maybe their own safety, but certainly some wealth for themselves. That's a possibility. It's on the table. I'm not trying to weave conspiracy. I'm just saying it doesn't serve anybody for everyone from legacy media to the Justice Department to deny the world as it exists.
Yeah.
It's just, this is it. And the other thing is, if in the event Jeffrey was selling this stuff, or he was collecting it from the get-go on behalf of a foreign intelligence service, in that event, everyone needs to assume, and I believe Donald does, that this shit is in the wild. And it's not that there's just one copy of everything and the Justice Department has it and they can delete it all and then it goes away. I mean, these were court cases also that involved victims. Victims' attorneys would have access to the information. The prosecutors involved had have access to the information. The court itself had access to the information.
Pam Bondi was the Attorney General of Florida, by the way, where the crimes took place. Before she was the
years. She was attorney, of Florida for the 8 years while Jeffrey was raping these girls. So
seems important.
That seems important too.
Yeah. You mentioned there's something else we should say because we haven't said it yet. Is the Bill Clinton piece? There's a lot of MAGA will say, well, the Democrats just want to protect Bill Clinton. And I think I can speak for pretty much everyone. If Bill Clinton did something like this, to hell with him. No one's going to come to his defense. If he committed crimes of this magnitude, then he deserves whatever's coming to him. Period. Yeah. Full stop.
Full stop.
Yeah.
I'm one of those few centrist liberals who gave up on Bill Clinton when he looked in the camera and he lied to my face. I don't like people who are swarmy with vocabulary because they are brilliant. I think he's an intellectual bully. And I think getting in front of the camera while being president and say, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I don't care if you did, but don't stand in front of the camera and lie your ass off to me about something like this. And I understand Ken Starr and all those people out to get you, and they're horrible.
Brett Kavanaugh.
But like, ew. So I don't trust you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's it. I agree. So, I guess now,
let alone this. Oh dear God.
Right. No, and that's the thing. And there's no,
and I love his wife. It has nothing to do with it.
And also, they're not the same person.
They're not the same person.
I hate when they're conflated. It drives me nuts.
God.
They're two different people. They're not. They're married, but they're two completely different individuals with individual agency, and that's just how it is.
Yeah.
So, do you think we're going to get to a point where the scales fall off the eyes, or how can we get to the point? I mean, what do you think we should do here?
I think this is the moment. I think we're in a moment right now, which is why we're doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. I didn't think I would ever have a moment where I would bother. I had so written off reaching people in his cult. I just, I did tremendous amount of work at a moment where I believed people could be reached with focusing on the money, focusing on his frauds, focusing on his crimes, focusing on all the, my God, I compiled this list years ago on Twitter at the time, which then became X, and X, when Elon took over, it was one of the big things that, a lot of powerful threads that had a lot of real information. I know this is social media, but it's where we were getting our news. Yeah. And they got broken up and dismembered and buried, and that's why I left that platform for a long, long time. I'm doing a little bit now, but I don't know. I was keeping track of all of the pedophiles around Donald, not just rapists and sexual assaulters as well, but where it was crimes and specifically pedophilia. There's Putin.
Wait. Hold on.
It's just a huge list.
Right. Bear with me.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That if you couldn't reach people then with that, I think they had to be betrayed by him in some way. And this is a real betrayal, and I think it's a real moment. I would like to think that he's not going to present some narrative that they can go, oh, okay, great. We've got this narrative now, and we'll run with this, and we can all go back to daddy, right? I'd like to think that enough of them have sort of had that shock value of realizing that they are marks and they were conned, really conned. And I want to say to those folks, it's a horrible thing to be conned, and cons work. It's not your fault that you were conned. You can look later at what it was that was about that you needed to believe in this guy, and examine that. But this is a real professional con man. Like, look at what he's achieved through lies and fraud and conning. He's achieved the presidency of the United States at this point in history, where we're this huge power, and we're free people.
Twice.
We're free people twice. I think he's going to go down as the greatest con man that ever lived. I will give him those flowers, as I've said with you. I give him those flowers. I don't know any other person who is this accomplished of a con man. This is a pro of pros. He's a pro. So you're MAGA. You're just his mark. He zeroed in on you. You were very vulnerable in ways that you had no idea. You're handing all of every thought, every emotion, every political leaning, your address, your farts on Facebook. You were posting all your shit, and all you had to do was work with Facebook, create an algorithm, scoop you up, and put ad tech software directing right at you. And you thought, oh my God, he thinks like I think. No, he just read your posts, guys.
Yeah.
And so but I understand how you couldn't see that and why falling for this. And if only those folks had found the work that I did, that you did, about all the work we did that predated Julie K. Brown, quite frankly. And she did incredible work.
Yeah.
Not taking anything away from her. She's an amazing journalist. But it's by the time she put her stuff out there, I think because we had surfaced so much and had done so much work that wasn't penetrating and wasn't getting into the bubble that Trump was creating and his team was creating around his base, QAnon could slide in there and they could come to know Jeffrey Epstein late to the game and run with a totally different narrative. So maybe Donald can create another narrative like that to run in another direction. But I'm hoping that enough of them have seen the light now. Can really take in who he really is and how dangerous this is, because they were right about that. It's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
It's very dangerous. Keep talking. Keep talking. I'm so sorry.
No. As he said, and what was I going to say? The last thing you said was it doesn't matter.
Keep talking because I got to plug my computer in again. I just lose all my battery. Sorry, Greg.
You're going to plug your computer in. No, I think that he is one of the greatest con men of all time. I think, as we talked about on the Twitter Spaces the other day, you have to go back to like some medieval pope to get to the level of mass, creating a situation based on lies to get a whole lot of people to behave in a certain way. And he was able to do it. And, God, I can't remember what I was going to say. It doesn't matter. Wait, is it on my... It was on my notes. Bill Clinton and the
con man.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
It doesn't matter. Whatever. It doesn't matter. So,
but you were saying the scales falling. Is this the moment?
And we'll see. I guess we'll see. I know what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I think he's waiting until the AI is good enough that he can blame deepfakes. I think that's what he's going to start blaming everything.
Oh, okay.
The videos he's going to be like deepfakes, Elon can whatever. It's going to be so prepare for that and know that it's a lie and bullshit. Okay. Let's just prepare for it. Okay. So to close, all right, do you know this game Categories? You know how to play Categories?
Yeah. Like categories?
Well, I don't know what Categories is, but Categories is you pick a thing that has a finite amount of, like colors. And then you say a color, I say a color until we run out.
Oh, God. All right.
We're going to play Categories. And the category is pedophiles in Donald Trump's orbit.
Can we include the rapists as well, like sexual assaulters and rapists?
I think we can. Yeah, sure.
Okay. We'll start with the pedophiles. All right.
Okay. You want to go first? Sure.
Yeah. Putin.
Okay. Jeffrey Epstein.
George Nader.
Okay. Ghislaine Maxwell.
Matt Gaetz.
John Casablancas, the guy from Elite, who we mentioned.
Yep, Jean-Luc Brunel.
Yep, he's on my list. Tafik Arif, the guy you mentioned with the yacht off Turkey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God, I had such a long list. Jim Jordan, but that's an enabler. An enabler.
Still, he counts. That counts.
Yeah.
I mean, what was Diddy accused of? I'm not sure, but they knew each other.
He said he knew, and he would sometimes look in the showers. There was one young man who were adult now, but yeah, for the Ohio State rapes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enabler.
No, Diddy, like Puff Dad, like Sean Combs.
Diddy. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I haven't really followed that. I don't know if the accusations involve underage people or not. I assume that they do, but I don't know.
I don't know, but definitely rape.
Yeah, he's definitely not a good guy. So okay, so now I guess we could pivot into the into the. Whew, I don't know. I have to go to dinner in half an hour, so let's.
There's more. I mean, it was this huge long list. It was crazy.
Yeah.
That party. Listen. I understand that Jeffrey was during an era that a Democrat was president. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it was the 90s, and Bill Clinton was president, and that's where the power was in the Democratic Party. But to think that the people behind Jeffrey, or that Jeffrey swam around with in terms of foreign intelligence services, haven't continued to Roy Cohn, by the way.
Roy Cohn, of course.
Roy Cohn, who said he had the biggest trove of Kompromat, sexual blackmail of anybody, private of anybody. I mean, I guess it would rival Larry Flint's, because Larry Flint had a bunch of it. but according to Larry Flynn.
Right.
Yeah, it's we're with the Republican Party now that does things like go to the 4th of July to the Kremlin, right? That has, I mean, because we could do the same game with the Russians involved in Donald's orbit and the gangsters, the mobsters. I could do that forever. I put a little video together of that. It just went forever, and it still wasn't complete. You know, this is the world that he's in.
Right. He doesn't have that many friends, is the point.
He doesn't.
And all of these people swirling around in his inner circle are all...
And Donald Trump himself.
Well,
Donald Trump himself.
Mm-hmm.
Who his own wife said.
Right.
You raped me.
Yeah. Which now they're parsing that. They're like threatening to... AOC said rapist and the... Did you watch The Apprentice, the movie? Because I recall seeing a scene in there in which Trump rapes Ivana. That's just... I don't recall any lawsuit there that stopped that from coming out. So I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, this is all. Go ahead and sue her. You know, she'll
have to get those Epstein files released, won't she?
Yeah. A jury found that he was, or he wouldn't have had to pay E. Jean Carroll because the defamation was, I never raped her. That was defamation. He did.
Mm-hmm.
The jury found that he did. There was evidence that he did enough to rule in her favor.
Yeah. So we say adjudicated.
So that's why when we say adjudicated rapist, that's what that means.
Right. But there's so many other accusers. I mean, he has a lot of I did a thread a long time ago. I think after Access Hollywood came, like there was a lot of accusers, like 4 dozen, I think, that we know of. Yeah. And those are just the ones we know about. That's a lot. I mean, 2 is too many, but 48 or something or whatever it is that's what we might call a pattern. If you were like one of those FBI profiler guys, you might say that this guy has a problem with this. Not to make light of it because it's horrifying. And as you said before, like, MAGA's right. Somebody like that should not be in a position of authority. Someone like that should be on a list. If they're not in prison, should be on a list of sex offenders and be living in the Econo Lodge down the street, which is the only place they're allowed to live in this town. So that's where he should be, based on all of this, all of these accusations. Unless you believe that all 48 women were full of it and they just wanted something from this guy. Which I do.
Yeah. So again, this sort of part of it that is hard to... It's hard to empathize with his followers who just ignored all of this and believed the bullshit, or aren't having a problem with what he and Stephen Miller are doing right now, you know? And aren't having a problem with Kristi Noem and how wretched it is, that can look at all of those, or what Elon Musk did, and can look at all of those lost souls in the Texas floods and not connect the dots that's because they couldn't get the warnings, because those services were done away with, so that we could have this gross transfer of wealth to billionaires, multi-billionaires, and that when those actual facts are brought up by journalists saying, we know that these people didn't get these warnings because of how you dismembered the emergency services and the weather services, and then reorganized it so everything has to go through Kristi Noem, and she didn't get this whole thing that they did, coming in and fucking around with the government under this sort of bullshit ruse, con of saying this is going to save us so money, so therefore we can give all these giveaways to these, we can strip Medicaid, all this stuff. That's all part of one piece of garbage. That Donald, when questioned about that, because there's culpability there. The government is culpable. The government under him is culpable for leaving these people stranded without warning. He calls that evil. Just to have have the actual facts at your disposal and need to question those in power about what they did, whatever their intentions may have been when they did it. Maybe they had good intentions and they were trying to fix things. They fucked it up.
They did.
And people are dead because of that.
Yeah.
That's not an evil question.
No. Which is what he said.
He
said that the journalist was evil for asking the question, right? Is
horrible.
that what he said?
What a horrible thing to say.
I want to say one more thing before we close. To your point about MAGA and being okay with all the Stephen Miller stuff, i.e. the rounding up of immigrants, because there's a wave of immigrants that are coming and they're having babies here and all this.
And U.S. residents and U.S. citizens.
Right. Donald Trump, 2 of his 3 wives are immigrants, and 4 of his 5 kids are born of the immigrants, all but Tiffany. So until ICE comes and gets rid of all of them, I don't want to hear another word. That's where I'm at. How do we know? Like, if we're going to get rid of birthright citizenship, Ivanka got to get out. Goodbye. Out. And I don't think that's going to happen. So what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander. That's how things are.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's not, then we have 2 Americas and we can't have that. That's not acceptable and should never be acceptable. So, anything we didn't cover that you want to get in before we close?
I think we
hit all the points.
Again, I just want to say the reason we're coming back to this and creating this content, we've created extra content. You know, we do a Friday night show that is fun, and I invite everybody to watch us on Friday night on YouTube. It's called the 5-8. If you're seeing this or reading about this and you didn't know that, and that's sort of been enough for you and I in terms of feeling like, okay, we've built these platforms, we're responsible citizens, we want to contribute to the discourse, we have a specific skill set, and we enjoy one another, and we enjoy the audience that we've built.
The community,
and
yeah.
Friday nights have been sort of, kind of enough for us. We added a show with some other 2 wonderful hosts on Wednesdays, so there's a show on Wednesday night as well with Lisa Grace and Nadine Smith. But this moment, we knew we got to do more, and so we've done more. But I don't know how much more we can do other than this. This sort of feels like, okay, I've kind of brought it back to attention. That what I would like to say about it is, now if we've spoken to MAGA, I want to speak to legacy media and anyone in legacy media and the punditry who would be watching this, listening to this, or reading this transcript of this. You're not doing your job by dismissing Jeffrey Epstein's very real, very documented, proven history, swimming around with foreign intelligence services and our own, quite possibly, and his criminal record, financial crimes that he committed that are very real, from the Ponzi scheme to the stuff at the SEC violations at Bear Stearns, to the offshore accounts, to the shady money, and the lies around his wealth, where it came from, where did it go? We don't have answers for any of that. It's not normal. None of it is normal. To deny this or say it's all just MAGA conspiracy because they think there's a cabal of sex traffickers and child sex rapists that control the world, and blah, 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 to then, and Jeffrey he's a spy for Mossad, all this stuff, to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that and not actually do your job of detailing the provable, demonstrable facts of this man's very real history is a real betrayal. Stop taking the easy, lazy way out on this. Stop it. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Do the work. It doesn't take much. There are still living witnesses, credible witnesses, who can verify that I spoke to, that you can go speak to, that can verify everything. There's actual offshore accounts that you can see in the Offshore Leaks database There's the Ponzi scheme and the crimes, and there are prosecutors still alive that will talk to you about that Ponzi scheme and who was involved, from Tom Barrack to Paul Manafort to Rudy Giuliani, was the lawyer for Financial. There, you can find it. You can dissect it. You can talk about it. And that gives the fulsome context of who this guy was and what kind of operation he was running. To just accept what Pam Bondi's saying now, and Kash Patel, that we looked for the conspiracy, but there's just no conspiracy there, to buy that garbage and just sort of say, yes, MAGA, oh God, maybe they'll, they were all lied to. And you need to start parsing out the garbage from the reality and report on this correctly, and report on Jeffrey Epstein correctly, and who he was, and who he was partnered with, and what kind of operation he was running, and who he was connected to. Because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you keep being lazy about this. And I'm being generous by saying you're being lazy and just saying, oh yeah, they think it's all this Pizzagate stuff. People like me and I will find other journalists, solid journalists, the journalists who've done the work on all of this. We're going to include your name in there, because there's no reason that you should be that lazy. There's no reason for it unless you're being threatened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Don Lemon did have
garbage at your job.
Well, yeah, you suck at your job. Don Lemon had Jeffrey Epstein's brother on, and
yes,
Jeffrey Epstein's brother said, "Oh yeah, Donald was in there." So he's a witness. That seems like a good journalistic work to me. I can think of another person who's sitting in federal prison right now who might know a thing or two.
Right.
And has no incentive to not talk, really.
Well, no incentive to not talk, but she's tricky.
Mm-hmm.
She's tricky. She wants a pardon.
I don't think she can get one now. I don't think that pardon's coming.
I think if she comes forward and she wants to testify, I don't know if she's doing it while we're doing this. Her case was coming before the court. So apparently there's reporting out there now about her that she wants to clear Donald's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's tricky. She's suspect. But again, we're legacy media to finally get on the beat of actually reporting on who she is, what she was up to, where she lied, right, about her relationship with Jeffrey and who he was, where they wove a myth together. It would go a long way. It would go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no denying her father was a spy. There's no denying it. And it's not just some fanciful book that was written. There are still former intelligence officers who worked with him, but also prime ministers were on the record at the time saying, yeah, he's one of ours. He works for our intelligence services. So I don't think those folks were lying.
People seem to enjoy these was it a murder or a suicide / accident stories. So that's a good one. Look,
that's a good one.
It's fun. He's buried in state in Jerusalem, so they're never allowed to dig up his body for an autopsy, by the way. Just putting that out there. So this has been fun, or as fun as it can be to talk about something so absolutely horrible. Thank you for joining me and sharing your knowledge with everybody, which is vast, and I appreciate you, and that's it. That's all I've got to say. So
thanks, Greg.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.